So with that, I will turn it over to Lauren. Certainly, if you have any questions, actually, when Lauren is done, if you have questions, I know she'll be taking questions throughout her presentation. But at the end, if I remember, we'll try to pass this wireless mic to you because we are recording this. It will be available online. Lauren is actually streaming this as well to your website, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
so we have people watching this, hopefully all over the country, possibly in other countries. We'll see.
That's awesome.
Cool.
Lauren, I'll let you take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, yeah, to sort of reiterate, this will be very open. This is not a straightforward, just look at the screen and I'll talk to you. If something is confusing, we have a brief question to clarify something. In the middle, just raise your hand. And then at the end, we'll take some more formal questions. Cool. Also, thank you, Ron, for helping us set up this live streaming. I know with all the technology going at once, it gets a little complicated, but I think it's pretty cool for people who can't be here as well. So thank you for that. All right, as Ron said, I'm Lauren Tracy. I am a filmmaker. I write, direct, and produce when necessary, but I like to call myself a businesswoman rather, because I think that in this day and age, filmmakers need to figure out all aspects of film, and that includes the business, and sometimes that actually takes up more of your time and more of your energy. So I'll be going into a little bit of that today, as well as highlighting just overall careers in film. This is our website. All right. Lauren Tracy presents Careers in the Film Industry. So this is a very vast topic. Right here you see this sort of 5 breakdowns in this film reel that I've made for you. It takes you from development of a movie to production, actually shooting that movie, to editing that movie and everything that needs to happen before it gets released. Releasing is the next section, and then there's sort of a miscellaneous support services that fit overall in all of those things. They don't necessarily have a specific time frame. And also, some of you may have the question of what is the difference between Hollywood movies and indie movies, and you might sort of understand indie film as a genre, but when it comes to the business of independent film versus Hollywood, a lot of the roles cross over, but especially in independent film, like any sort of small business, you end up doing a lot more roles, taking on a lot more responsibilities when you are making independent films, and the business functions a little bit differently. The other thing I want to mention before we get really deep into this is that I'm going to be talking about the places that I've been and worked in film, and those are sort of major cities, but the fact of the matter is these things can happen everywhere, and Los Angeles is, yes, the hub. It's Hollywood, if anybody knows it, but there are places all over the world, and especially this country now, that are starting to crop up, and it's becoming easier and easier to do this from anywhere. It sort of depends on what you want to do. Austin, Texas is a really great up-and-coming independent space. London has some great stuff happening. Toronto, Canada, Seattle, Washington, New York City, and more. I'd like to put Boston on this list, although it's still a little bit small, but that's where I'm located. Okay, so to make a little bit of sense of this wheel here, I'm going to take you through where I am now and how I got there to put that in perspective, and then we'll go deeper into defining what those roles actually mean. Cool. As I said, I'm in Boston. I have recently moved here from LA, and I spent a little bit of time in New York, and we'll go through that. My roles are writer, director, and entrepreneur. I would say that these guys and gal, Quentin Tarantino, Spielberg, and Sofia Coppola, all fit within that realm. And I would like to make narrative films. That's why those guys are up there. So our company is X Factor Filmmakers. Myself and my father, there he is, over there, are co-founders of this film studio. We are a next-generation film studio, we call ourselves. We create, brand, and release badass, female-driven entertainment. And to give you an example, this is our first feature film. I wrote this, and I will direct. It is not shot yet. And I'm going to show you guys a development trailer. We're calling it a concept teaser trailer. It gives people an idea of what the movie will be like in order to get recognition early on, raise some money, build an audience, that kind of thing. The next generation part of this has a little bit to do with that, building an audience from a really early stage using the internet, hence why we're doing things like streaming early on. This is not something that Hollywood does very often.
Let you in on something. You're not fooling anyone.
I miss you, Dad.
That gun belongs to me, you know.
Por favor, ¿dónde puedo encontrar agua? Now you trust me.
I gave it to Carson for protection.
En México hay una historia que les decimos a los niños. Y al final, los niños que mantienen secretos son castigados.
Listen, I'm looking for my brother. I've seen pictures of them together.
Is that her?
You want to tell me what the hell's going on here? I want you to tell me where my brother is.
I found something.
Por favor, ¿dónde puedo encontrar agua?
Bravo.
Thank you. So this is what we call badass female-driven content. So we'll get a little bit back to that specific concept later, but so this is Sweet as a Palm. This will be our first narrative project, as I told you. Our goal is to work with other filmmakers with female-driven content, either behind the camera or in front of the camera, meaning female filmmakers or female characters on screen, or both. This is something that is vastly missing from the marketplace, and so that's sort of our business edge. All right. That's what I do in a nutshell. That's what we're doing right now. Now, how the heck did we get there? All right, we're in Acton now. This is my hometown. I went to high school here, and this is where this all began. When I was growing up, I liked to draw, I liked to paint, I liked to play soccer. This is an example of both of those things put together. This is a painting I did of some girls on my soccer team. And that was something that, those things made a lot of sense to me. I was really, really passionate about that. And at a certain point, I sort of realized, I know I want to do something related to art, but I didn't know what it was exactly, and I didn't think that it was strictly drawing, painting, design. It felt to me like there was something missing. And then when I was 16 years old, I saw this little movie called Pirates of the Caribbean, and something sort of clicked for me. I realized that there was something really exciting here. I wanted to know how they made this. I wanted to know how the director was working with actors, and luckily on DVDs you have extra features. So that's what I would do. I literally watched this movie over and over again, and then I watched the extras over and over again to try to make connections, and that's how I started learning. And then I asked for a video camera. It would have looked something like this, probably something a lot of you guys have played with. And I just started making little things. And then in high school, if any of you went to AB, there are a few film classes there, and that's where I started to learn about classic films like The Graduate. And then I graduated. I decided I wanted to go to film school. And for me, the best fit was RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology. They had a soccer team and a film school, which was rare. So I decided to do that, and it was a good fit for me. The other thing that they did really well was they stayed on top of technology, so we always had the latest stuff to play with. And for me, that was really important because I'm a very hands-on person. I like to learn by doing. And as an example of that, this is a Bolex camera. This is a black and white silent film camera. You wind it, and then for about 30 seconds, it rolls, and that's all you have. So you know you have to fit your shot within that. And then we would edit that actual literal film. We would cut it, and then we would tape it together, and that's how we would show our very first movies at film school. That was a really cool experience. Not something, I don't think they do at every film school anymore. Things are changing pretty quickly. So I was sort of at the in-between, between the transition from actual film to digital. Took a lot of classes like Intro to Film, directing, acting, production, sound, editing, and writing. So I learned overall everything, and almost every short film I made in college, I wrote, directed, and edited, or worked with other people on those roles. That's how a lot of film schools work. Some film schools also, I should say, and feel free to ask me questions about this later. They do it a little bit differently. Some film schools, you study, you learn the history of film and other methods of filmmaking before you actually get to physically make movies yourself. So it really depends on what you're looking for and what that film school has to offer you that you could find out ahead of time coming out of school. And I should also say that film school isn't necessarily for everybody. It's not like being a doctor. You don't need to go to film school to become a filmmaker. So then I started making films. This is a documentary about George Eastman Kodak. Then I moved on to narrative film, started experimenting with different characters, different ages, different genders, figuring out what exactly I thought my style was. I knew early on I wanted to be a director. I didn't know for a while that I wanted to also write, but as I was writing out of necessity, I learned that I was also very in love with writing. So then I would go on to call myself a writer-director. Then, in the middle of college, this thing sort of came to light, and that was that there aren't that many female directors in the world, and that was really shocking to me. At first, I didn't think too much of it. I just sort of felt like, okay, well, I mean, I'm one, so there's that, and I'm just going to do this. But my dad was pretty adamant that I should look into this and figure out what I was getting myself into, and as usual, he was right. And I started to do that. So he and I ended up looking into this, realizing that before 2010, when Catherine Bigelow won the Oscar for Best Director for The Hurt Locker, No woman had actually ever won before, and it had been 81 years of the Oscars. So this was just before that, about 2 years before that was when we started this venture together. So that was really shocking to me. And so we started X Factor Filmmakers back then as an organization that supported women in film. That meant not physical production like we do now, but it meant more raising money, raising awareness for females in film, partnering with other schools, organizations, or film festivals to give away awards, that kind of thing. Creating t-shirts, selling them to raise money. Then I made one last short film before I left school, and I decided I wanted to use this as a sort of 2-minute reel of an example of the work that I could do. I knew I wanted to go to Hollywood. I sort of chose between New York and LA, and I thought at the time that LA had a lot more film, and New York had a little bit more television and theater, and I was leaning more towards film. So I decided that that's where I wanted to go. And so I shot this small short, 2 minutes. It's actually on my personal website, if you guys ever are interested in watching it. And I used that to sort of show what I can do. Graduated, packed a little bit into my car, including a computer, and I drove across country. My dad and I drove across, and we went through the desert, and I fell in love with the desert. That was the first time I'd seen a landscape like that, being from the Northeast. It's very, very different. If any of you have been out there, Sedona, Arizona, it's beautiful, right? Totally different. It's like another planet. So that sort of got my creative juices flowing. We'll put hold on that thought, but we'll come back to it. So then I went to LA, and I knew pretty much no one. I had worked on a feature film at RIT right before I left, and a lot of the people that worked on that were from LA. So I knew a couple people, but not that well, and only for a couple months. And I found one other girl who was also moving out there at the same time, and we just decided to move in together because we didn't know anybody else. So that's what we did, and luckily it worked out. And I used what little contacts I had, which I would highly recommend anybody who wants to get into the film industry, figure out how you're connected to the film industry now, because that can really help you, and in a lot of cases is most people's way in the beginning. This was my mom's, my grandmother's co-worker's daughter owned this production company. So it was a boutique commercial production company, which means that they made commercials. They had a slew of directors that they would then shop around for different projects. They made car commercials, McDonald's commercials, anything you've probably seen, they've done something related to that. But they were a small organization, so they could take me on and say, yeah, sure, you can come just help our guy out in the editing room and learn some stuff. So that's what I did. That was unpaid, so then I had to start getting jobs. And the skill set that I had that seemed to be the most valuable was editing. Not a lot of people actually knew how to use the programs, the software for editing, so that was something that was great because I learned that in college. This is the interface for Final Cut Pro. You guys use Final Cut Pro here?
Yes.
Yeah. So, take classes at ActonTV.
Thank you.
And I would basically just freelance edit. That's what I did to make a living in LA. And I would go from gig to gig. I would search Craigslist. That's how I started out. That's how most of my friends started out with everything. And then eventually it became word of mouth. Then I had a reel. Then I had a website. Then I could show people what I did. And that's what really got the ball rolling. Some people decide to get waitressing or hostessing gigs if they run low on money. I got lucky and I got a part-time job at Apple to supplement my income, which was great because I was an editing specialist for their software there. So I had a little bit of a leg up getting there. It was a very competitive job to get. One of the best, I think, part-time jobs you could really get was at Apple. So that's what I did, and that happens to a lot of people all the time. The thing about the film industry is that most people are freelance, unless you're working for a studio. most of the people I know, I should say, are freelance. I don't know what the actual statistics are. And those gigs often last a few months, a few weeks, not even that long. It depends. When you're shooting a movie actual production will be about a month long, give or take. And then those people go on and do some other projects. So they have to sort of figure out how to survive in between or make sure they're getting that next job really early. Then I started establishing myself a little bit more as a director. I knew editing wasn't what I wanted to do forever. It was sort of a means to an end for me, although I did love it. It's a lot like writing, just rewriting with images. And I directed my first music video out in LA. That's a shot from that. And then I moved up in the editing world a little bit, started getting jobs editing feature films. So I edited 2 feature films, one of them being this film, Your Friends Close, by a now friend of mine, Jocelyn Kelvin. So I started to work with female directors who seemed to be attracted to that, and I was attracting them, I think, probably with my mindset, although knew very much so that we were there's very few of us. In Hollywood, of the top 250 top grossing movies every year, it's anywhere between 11 and 6% of the directors are female. This past year was 6%, so it's really on the low end. On the optimistic side, I think most of those female directors are moving into independent film, as are many people who are having a hard time getting through the studio door, which is very, very small. It's understandable. Back to the desert. So after moving up in the editing world a little bit, getting some directing gigs, I realized I wanted to go back to writing and really make my own stuff. So I started to make the move towards that, and I began writing Sweet Desert Palm. It started as a music video idea, then it moved to a short film, and then it moved to a feature film. We never actually made the short. Instead, we decided to make the trailer. We thought it would be a better move for us in the long run, and that we would have more to show with that than just a couple of scenes from a short film. So, I was in LA for 3 years, and that was a fantastic experience. The weather alone would have been worth it. My brother came to live with me for a while, and I had a blast, and I learned a ton really quickly about the film industry and about life, about everything. But for both professional and personal reasons, I wanted to come back to the East Coast. My boyfriend was becoming solidified here in Boston with his own company, and I knew that at some point I would have to come back if that was going to work out. And simultaneously, I had heard of a bunch of people in New York doing really cool things that seemed to align a little bit better with what I was trying to do than I found in Hollywood. The independent game in Hollywood is big, but because the studios are there, they sort of live underneath that shadow, and it's harder to find those people. In New York, the big game is independent. So I got to find those people really quickly. And in particular, there was one company in New York City that I went to visit, and I stayed for 3 months working with them. This company is called Dogfish Accelerator. For those of you not familiar with the term accelerator or incubator, basically that comes from the startup business world, where they would invest in a few companies really early on in the process of them developing their companies, and they would mentor them, give them seed funding, figure out what they needed all together as a group, as a community, with the hopes that, a few of them would be wildly successful, and that company, Dogfish Accelerator, or some other incubator, would make back their money on that group. And that's sort of the model for that. And these guys decided they wanted to do that with film. Independent film is a changing world right now. The business is sort of like the wild, wild west a little bit, especially with the internet. You can do anything. You could shoot a feature film and put it on YouTube, right? Doesn't mean you're necessarily going to make money off of it, but you've made your stuff and you put it out there. So now a lot of people are going, we have the technology, we have the ability to make something and put it out there. How do we get audience eyes on it? How do we control the financing side of that, making money back, and how that whole business structure works? That's what everyone's trying to figure out at the moment. Technology has shot us forward, and now we're trying to catch up with the rest of it. So that's what these guys are trying to solve in New York. And I realized that working on a lot of independent feature films that there was great creative teams, but if we didn't have an amazing business team, that things sort of fell through the cracks, and it was harder to figure out, well, what are we going to do with this movie once it's done? A lot of movies are shot without a specific marketing plan, and then they try to sell to distributors. And that becomes a little bit difficult if that doesn't work out. Then what do you do? And then how do you pay your investors back? So this was very interesting to me, knowing that I was going into making my first film. So what attracted me to these guys was that. What attracted them to us was that we were thinking a little bit differently about how to put our film out there a little bit earlier. That's what this concept trailer did for us. So that's that frame on the left there. We also have a poster that we made early. So this actress is an amazing, amazing actress. I hope she's watching this stream right now and hears me say that. And but we are not officially cast. All the main roles in the film will be auditioned for. And these actors were so gracious and decided that they would film this with me. And they believed in the project and they wanted to be involved. So they're sort of building us up a little bit, which was really great. And we also made a website for the film to start making it feel real. And it gave us a little bit of credibility. People could see content on that site, from the trailer to descriptions about the people making the movie, to the story, to other things that we just shot on set. And so we decided, well, these are female filmmakers making this stuff, and it has to do with X Factor. And we started to morph X Factor filmmakers into a production company. So we dropped the supporting women in film, even though that's still a big part of what we do. And we started figuring out what the brand was now in terms of a business versus a more nonprofit type organization. When I was in New York, I directed my second music video for a friend named Ian. His new band is called Side Saddle. This is his debut EP and debut music video. And on that, I met a producer who we worked with just for a few days, really, on that shoot. And I decided that that relationship was really, really great. She was also involved with Dogfish Accelerator, and she came from the business end of things. She is a serial entrepreneur, she calls herself, in fashion and film. She has a production company of her own and a couple fashion companies, and she's really into marketing, which is a huge part of our business model. So we decided to get together and work on Sweet Desert Palm together. Shortly after that, I asked the guy who ran Dogfish Accelerator if he would be the executive producer of Sweet Desert Palm, as well as a mentor for our company. And he agreed. So he is our executive producer. And he's made about 6 other films now. Some of them have gone through Sundance. The latest one was with Paul Rudd and Emile Hirsch, and that was called Prince Avalanche. You guys have heard of it. All independent films, but doing pretty well. And that's how I ended up here. So after the 3 months there, after that program, I moved back to Boston and went full swing into what we were trying to do. I'll go back for a second. And yes, so we went back to Boston for a couple of reasons. One was, we knew even in New York City, though there's a lot of contacts there, we were still a pretty small fish and about a medium-sized pond, I guess, if you're going to compare it to LA being the really, 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 really big pond. And Boston is sort of very film-friendly, very independent film-friendly. People get really excited. That's why you guys are here, right? And that felt like a really good place for us to start. So we started using that local aspect as a real driving force for what we were doing. And we got the attention of an accelerator program, not for film, but for businesses in general. And they liked what we were doing as well. So that's where we ended up. We can get back to that too. All right. So that's my path in film. That's where I've ended up right now. That's how we got there. And within this wheel, I have done a few of these jobs, but mostly I've learned from friends who have done the other ones, or from things I read, or just from being in the industry and being around people who have these careers. So I'm going to go in and highlight a little bit of that. If anything is confusing, please, again, raise your hand and just let me know. I'll try to clarify it. Okay. First, with a film or with television, you start with development. That basically means I have an idea, or I have a script, and I'm ready to make this movie. So that usually starts with writing. Sometimes it starts with a concept higher up at a studio. Maybe a studio executive has an idea. They say, I want to make this thing about this. We'll put Brad Pitt in it. It'll be really great. There'll be explosions and love scenes. And then they go, well, who would be best to write that? And they go and hire the man or woman who they think should write that. Sometimes it comes that way. Other times it comes from someone like myself who wants to write a script. That's called a script on spec. So you write a script on spec, meaning nobody's already bought it. You're doing it for free for yourself, and then you hope to sell it. And you can also write television pilots on spec, and then you go and shop it around to studios. The other way you can do it is the way I'm doing it. You can make it yourself independently, or you can try to bring on some professional team to make it independently. Independently basically means outside of the studio system, which is about 3 very large companies that you guys probably hear about all the time. All right. So writing. Writer-director, creator for TV. Sometimes you call the writer of a television pilot, if they were the first one who came up with the concept, you call them the creator, and then that carries throughout the show, and they either stay the lead writer, or they oversee everyone, or they're the main writer the entire time. With some HBO shows, it's that way. And writer's assistant. I have not heard of writer's assistant when it comes to film, only with television. Usually on a TV show you have a writer's room, and there's a group of writers together and a writer's assistant generally taking down a lot of the notes, maybe transcribing things for them, and sometimes that writer's assistant becomes a writer because they're learning so much about that show that they then understand the language of that, and they can move up in the world. So a lot of people sort of get that. That's the flow of how to become a writer in television, at least. Then once you've written something, you go into pre-production. Should do this one first after you get financing. So an executive producer can be for TV or film. An executive producer is can sometimes feel like a wishy-washy role, because an executive producer can be anyone from somebody who brings money to the project themselves, finds money from other people, brings in a bunch of financiers together, or someone that just brings overall value to the film or television show that isn't otherwise specified by another role. That could be pretty much anything. With the case of our films, like for example, my dad could be considered an executive producer because he brings branding and design expertise that isn't necessarily defined by something else. And then financier and investor, pretty straightforward, though finding them not as straightforward. Back to pre-production. So pre-production is exactly what it sounds like. Before production, right before you shoot. For a film, sometimes 1 to 3 months, I'd say, where you are preparing everybody. When you are in development, which is right before pre-production really, you have a writer, a director, a producer, an executive producer, and that's it, really. You start casting, but then to make the actual movie, you suddenly have this massive group of people, sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands, sometimes 10, depending on how big your project is. And you have to hire those people. So pre-production is usually set aside for that. Building out that team quickly can be pretty ambitious and difficult to navigate, so you have to give yourself some time. So people who are really doing work during that time period are the producer, director, depending on how involved they are, if they're hired just to come on and basically shoot the movie. But they will come on at this point. Most of their job is done on set. A line producer is somebody who handles more of the numbers, the budget. They get down into the nitty-gritty of that, managing how people get paid, all that kind of thing. Producer oversees more of everything, even higher than that. And they are controlling all the logistics everywhere. Casting, exactly how it sounds, that's actors. Storyboard artist is somebody who will take the script and the director and the cinematographer's vision and put it down on paper for them so that they can be referring to that and really understand how that film is going to build out while you're shooting. Oftentimes, if not most of the time, you shoot completely out of order because it all depends on what locations you get, when the actors are available, all that. So really hammering that down and making sure your main team understands that is extremely important. So storyboard artist, get that. Then we move on to production. Producing, as I said, explained a little bit. Film and television, it's a little bit different. On a film, it's more logistics. On television, it can be a little bit more creatively hands-on, I'd say. Although I will back up and say that a producer on a documentary can often be pretty creative as well, because documentaries are very different than narratives. There's a lot of ebb and flow, and you have to react to things when they're happening. You're shooting something that's real, right? So somebody who is responsible for logistics also sort of becomes responsible for a storyline in a way, along with the directors. Line producer, same thing. Assistant director. Assistant director is a little bit confusing. An assistant director is more like an assistant producer than an assistant director. The assistant director is the person on set who is preparing everybody right before the director says action. So the person who says quiet on set, they make sure that the slate, the clapper, is ready to go and that everybody is quiet, and then they defer over to the director for the creative portion. But they're the ones that really wrangle people when it comes down to the actual making of the thing. So they're the ones with the whip, I guess you would say. Mm-hmm. That's probably the best way to describe it. And unit production managers, an extension of the producer and line producer as well. That person is, again, this is a massive undertaking, so these might blend together a little bit, but unit production manager is responsible for hiring people, making sure everybody's there on set. Line producer sort of takes care of the behind the scenes and stuff on paper, and unit production manager is a little bit more present with the actual people. Then, of course, there's acting. That I'm not going to go too much into. I think most people know more about that than everything else, but feel free to ask me any questions. Camera and lighting. The director of photography or cinematographer, same thing. DOP, DP, all the same thing. This person is responsible for what the project looks like. And they work very closely with the director, and they figure out exactly what this is going to look like, what the camera movements are, what the lighting should feel like, what the mood is, all of the nitty-gritty of that stuff. And then the director of photography, under him, he manages the gaffer, best boy, key grip. Well, actually, I wouldn't really say that key grip and grip are underneath the director of photography, but they work very closely. Gaffer and best boy are lighting people. The gaffer is the person who's really controlling where the lights are actually physically moving. So the director of photography will be sort of relaying what it's supposed to look like, and the gaffer and the best boy are the ones actually maneuvering that and putting it together. Then we have key grip and grip. Most of the time it's grips, many grips, especially if you have to move a lot of things. These tend to be physically strong people who can move pretty much anything that you need on set. and are controlling anything from set walls to sandbags to apple boxes that people need to be propped up on if an actor is short, or if the camera's up really high and the director, like myself, is short, then that person needs an apple box to stand on. That's a very small example of what these people can do. And then there's, of course, directing. A director in film and television are very, very different. Concept-wise, basically the same. They're directing actors, they understand the storyline, they need to translate the script to the screen and really be the communicator of that creative process. But a director on film controls that whole film set, right? From start to finish, for that month long, they're the ones controlling that creatively. On television, you usually, not always, you usually have guest directors. So a director will direct for 1, 2, 3 episodes, maybe in a row. Maybe they may come and go, they've got other gigs to do, etc. And so the producer and the writers and the actors really need to know their characters and the script and the general arc of the thing and make sure everything feels the way it's supposed to be, right? If you had a Law and Order feel like a Castle or something that doesn't have the same tone, even though they're both crime shows, then something would feel really off. The people working on that all the time, they're going to know that. So when a director comes in, it's a little bit less intense than directing a film. So they definitely have the support of the people around them who've been there. Other departments: costume, hair and makeup, props, special effects. And there are often, on big studio movies, there are guilds that these different roles fit under, and the prop master, you call the person who has control of all the props. If somebody were to move that plant, let's say, and they were not in the props department, then technically, I don't know if you can get sued, but you're not supposed to, right? Because those people were hired for that particular reason, and they know what they're doing, and they're responsible for all of that. Oftentimes you're renting a lot of things, perhaps expensive things, and you have to return those. So every department is really broken up, and everybody has their responsibilities. Then there's special effects. Special effects, and we'll get to visual effects, are very different. Special effects are particularly on set. So anything that you're going to do with trickery of the camera, making, I don't know if stunts come under special effects. They might. But this is something that's done through the camera, not afterwards with CGI or digitally. If you guys want, there's a much more extensive, there are many extensive lists of these roles online, and I can give you the links to them afterwards if any of you guys are interested. This is also a public presentation, so you can just have a link right to this presentation. Cool. Post-production. This is what I spent a lot of time doing. First and foremost is editing. Once a film is shot, oftentimes you get into the editing room as fast as you can. Sometimes editors on set, sometimes now it's easier to send footage online to a remote editor so they can start editing immediately so that you can get your product out faster. Generally with editing, you have lead editor and assistant editing. Assistant editing would be taking care of a lot of things in Final Cut or Avid Media Composer or whatever you're editing in. That's the nitty-gritty. Syncing the sound with the video. Oftentimes they come in separately, especially when you're talking about shooting on film. But still, sometimes you shoot it separately. And you have to make sure that that is really on point. If it's off by, say, 1 frame, most people won't notice. 2 frames, 3 frames, everybody feels like there's something wrong with that image. The mouth is just like slightly not matching up with the sound, then something's a little screwy. So you have to make sure you get that stuff right away. So often the assistant editor is taking care of that kind of things, a lot of the exporting and importing. And the lead editor is the one really doing the creative storytelling with the film. So he or she will be chopping at the exact moment where I react to something and I look over there, and then you want to cut away from my face at the moment where something's happening over there, and then she turns back and she looks at me, and that you could cut that a million different ways, and it could be dramatic, it could be funny, it could be too repetitive, it could be too short. If you don't leave someone's face up enough, you may think, I didn't get, what is her reaction? Is she happy? Is she scared? What is that? If you don't stay on somebody and read those emotions for long enough, then the message could be off. Editing is just like writing. It's really, really particular. It takes a lot of skill and a lot of time. Effects. Visual effects. You do this afterwards. You do this on a computer. You do this digitally. This is happening more and more now. Avatar, etc. Special effects, a little bit more old school, but people still do that all the time. Stereoscopic conversion, excuse me. The only reason I know what this is because I had a friend who had this job. And basically, what that is when you see a 3D movie, if that movie wasn't shot with two cameras, so that you get that sort of 3D effect, like slightly off, something's in the foreground, something is in the background, then you have to go in later, so it's sort of a visual effect, I guess, and literally frame by frame sort of remove pieces and put one in the foreground and one in the background. So stereoscopic conversion is making something 3D afterwards. I hope I didn't butcher that. And then sound. Sound is awesome. Sound is really important. What's crazy, the crazy thing to learn about sound once you start making movies is that nothing is real. Everything is redone, especially in big Hollywood movies. You know, if I were to walk across this room and you guys were to record it, big Hollywood movies would probably not actually use the sound that you recorded on set. They'd redo it later because they wanted it to have a certain effect. They wanted the room to feel smaller or bigger, or maybe it was big, but for some reason those steps don't sound the same way that they should. And this is a dramatic scene, and that person is walking towards their death or their loved one or whatever it is. You can make those steps, in addition to music and everything else, feel a certain way. So oftentimes, pretty much everything is redone, and that's done by someone called a Foley artist. So that person is literally in a room, you know, using things sometimes for steps. It's not even actual feet. It could be something totally different. And like for bones breaking, things like that, I think I've heard people have used like crisp lettuce, just gone really close to, you know, a mic and just broke it. And then sometimes you create some other sounds and you layer them on top of each other. And then the sound editor will put those all together in the way that he or she feels like is the right level of, you know, tree or branch breaking versus like twig breaking versus lettuce crunch. Like layer them on top of each other and figure out which one is the best sound, which one should come forward and go backwards. And then the sound mixer will take all of the music, all of the sounds, all of the dialogue, all of the ambient sound, which is what you would record in a room, and really smooth that all out altogether. So it's sort of the same as a mixer of music would be doing for, you know, an album. Voiceover artist is sometimes just a voiceover artist, especially when it comes to animation, right? You have somebody's voice behind that animated character, versus if you need to do some ADR. I don't even know what that stands for. I bet most of the people in the industry don't.
Automatic dialogue replacement.
Yes. So ADR is basically when, let's say there was a loud fan in here that we couldn't turn off, and we still had to record. We didn't have any options. We couldn't figure out how to turn it off. We had to record anyway. And so you have this loud buzzing over my voice the whole time. Then in post-production, I would have to go into the booth and redo my own voice. So lip sync to myself, essentially, and do it over again. So that's ADR. And then music. Music, again, there's mixing that comes in here besides just composing. But as far as everything I've ever been on, the sound mixer covers both the sound and the music. Composing is a really amazing thing in film. Working with, the director and the editor and the sound guy, the composer can come up with something that fills the space of the emotion of the thing that's not yet there. And, I'm sure you all have favorite soundtracks of movies that have that kind of effect on you. And that composer is doing something really amazing. Now we come to more of the business. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that most audience members don't see when it comes to the business of a movie. And a lot of that excitement really comes after the film is made. So in releasing a film, there are a bunch of people involved. Sales agents, it's actually something I'm still learning a lot about, because I've never actually worked with one directly. Short films don't typically have sales agents. They're not very lucrative. So this is my own first feature film. But sales agents essentially will watch a movie and help you, if they like the movie, help you sell the film domestically and overseas. Generally overseas is pretty confusing to a filmmaker or even a producing team, because it's a totally different world out there. So usually you want a sales agent who's really familiar with what they call foreign territories. Oftentimes, too, a thing that's pretty popular is a sales agent will help you figure out how much money you could potentially make back, especially when it comes to your actors. So let's say there are fairly well-known actors in your movie. If not, this doesn't really apply at all. Then they can say, well, Brad Pitt and France is selling really well right now. I think you can make back X amount because the movie is about this, and they really like that over there. Sort of very general terms in terms of that, but it's one of the best ways to figure out how much you're going to make back theatrically. We're talking, not necessarily. VOD is still a little bit up in the air, confusing to people. It's still very new, so the numbers on that are.
What's VOD?
VOD, video on demand. Thank you, Mom. VOD is anything from on demand on your TV, paying pay-per-view, to Netflix, iTunes, things like that. Which comes up a little bit here. So distributors. Sales agents will work with distributors, and distributors can be anything from theatrical to, that just means seeing it in a theater, instead of seeing it at home or on your computer. And those are the other two, seeing it at home or on your computer. Acquisitions, a distributor who acquires a film means that they will buy that film and the rights. All right, sometimes it's partial rights. Let's say a theater company has the ability to show the movie in theaters in the U.S., but they don't necessarily have the Canadian rights, or they don't have the Chinese rights, or whatever it is. Then those will be sold to somebody else. But essentially, they're buying the right to then do whatever they want with that movie, and then the money will be theirs to make back. But they will pay that production team, that filmmaking team, for that film. Examples of that are all big studios have their own acquisition team. So if I make Sweet Desert Palm and Universal says, oh, wow, we really want that movie, we think that's going to do really well, then they could just buy it after I'm done with it. Say I go to film festivals and they've seen it somehow. And then I could sell that to them for $1 million or $500,000 or more, or whatever they want to buy it for. And then they take it off my hands and I go and make another movie. That's one way of doing it independently. Our way is a little bit different. We want to keep a little bit more rights because increasingly that amount that big studios or any studio will pay for a film is smaller and smaller, and sometimes it doesn't help you make back your money for your investors that you've taken from them. Then platforms, we're also considering Netflix and iTunes a distributor now? iTunes will acquire something, not necessarily exclusively, right? Something can be on iTunes and Netflix and Amazon or Hulu or a number of other things, and those are still considered distributors, but the model for how to push that out to an audience is different than in the theatrical world. Then we have marketing. Okay, once the distributor has this movie, how are people going to see it? How are they going to know about it? So again, the big studios have in-house ways of doing this, and independently you have to figure out how you're going to do that. So there's plenty of companies that you can hire to do your marketing arms, or you can do it yourselves. A lot of documentaries do a lot of things themselves because those usually have to do with some existing either problem, something that somebody's interested in, or a cause. So they generally already have an audience, right? So let's say there's a film about some terrible disease, and there's a lot of people active in trying to create a cure for that disease. Then there will be inevitably plenty of people interested in what that documentary has to say. So social media becomes really big for a film like that. Advertising, regular straight advertising, billboards, online ads, somebody edits your trailer. Generally, filmmakers do not do their own trailers. This concept trailer is an exception, but it's a totally different art, and that took a lot of time and effort and feedback from people who know how to do that kind of thing to get there. But generally, you outsource that because it's very hard to look at your own film and say, well, what's really exciting about this and what's going to make this sell without giving away too much. There's just too many factors there. Film festivals are really, really huge for independent film. Film festivals were essentially created for independent film when there started becoming too many films for studios to all distribute themselves, or they just weren't interested because their audience wasn't necessarily the audience for these smaller films. So they started cropping up, and those are, in the last 20 years, have gained in popularity massively. And now the next wave is online, and what are people doing online to sort of create online film festivals or online modes of distribution, finding audience numbers. PR is just as it sounds, public relations. That is, a lot of time, a lot of PR comes out of film festivals. You get into a film festival, and a lot of independent magazines or newspapers will pick that up and start talking about it. Bloggers are really, really great PR for people these days. Then you have some other support services like representation of talent. This can be for directors, editors, actors. Those are sort of the three main ones. And agents, managers, and assistants cover that. Agents and managers are also something I'm still learning a lot about because I don't have them. Although I don't know if I will need to, the direction that I'm going. But agents and managers, there's a slight difference between them. One of them, and I'm not going to butcher which one it is, but agents and managers generally have to have both. And one of them you pay more upfront, and another one takes commission on whatever you get. And there are some major companies in Hollywood that, there's about 4 or 5 really big representation companies. And if you're in one of those, you're generally doing pretty good. Law. This is big. Especially for independent film, trying to figure out, okay, we're making this movie, how do we do this right? How do we make sure that we are covering our butts when it comes to money, that we are protecting ourselves, and how do we do that the right way? When you make a film, on top of having a production company, that film actually has to be its own legal entity. So technically, Sweet As Their Palm will be Sweet As Their Palm LLC, or whatever the legal entity you choose is, generally their LLC. And that's done to protect the filmmakers, just like any company is made a legal entity to protect the people running it. Entertainment law generally covers lawyers representing people in entertainment across the board. Securities law is specifically about investment, and not all securities lawyers understand a lot about entertainment, or the other way around, so sometimes they have to work together. There are a lot more extensive lists. There's an extensive list of these supporting services online. You can find that here. So, with this new wave of independent film and technology and the internet that I keep talking about, and the reason why we're streaming, and the reason why this is up here right now, and my dad was so adamant about making sure that the Sweet Desert Palm logo is up, and that I tell you guys what X Factor Film is, X Factor Filmmakers, excuse me, xfactorfilm.com, is because filmmakers now need to create a brand for themselves. The reason why I am an entrepreneur is because I realized that I love the creative aspect of what I'm doing. It's the reason why I'm doing it. I don't think I'd be a businesswoman without some kind of creative aspect to what I'm doing. The creative is first, and you have to get that right. But you have to support that with these other things, as I'm saying. And if I want to make this movie, and then I want to make the next film, and the next film, then I have to make sure that my audience and that the industry and anybody I want to work with or that I am working with understands my own personal brand. So they say, oh, I have this film, this script. It's badass female content. It's also got this emotional edge to it. Feels like something Lauren Tracy would direct. Then they'll call me up and they will hire me. If I don't make it really clear what I want to do and what I am doing and that sort of style, that creative style, then that hurts my business brand. So that's something that we think is really, really important, increasingly so for a world where independent filmmakers can sort of become more like musicians. And what I mean by that is that they have this following, right? They have an audience that will come back for what they do each time, because each time a musician releases an album or goes on tour, that audience knows basically what they're going to get, and they're looking for what they're going to do next, how they're improving on that. And a lot of people that I met in New York, and what I feel like is that's the way that independent film is going, and specifically for narrative filmmakers, needs to go to create a really strong brand and following and be able to continually engage the audience and make money so you can make the next movie. So that's the point, right? So I don't think that at the moment where we are, this is very clear to a lot of people in the industry. We're all sort of going, well, how do we find this audience? I've got this movie, I can buy a camera, and I have plenty of people that know how to do this. Let's make a movie together. Cool. How do we get it out there? We don't have an audience. Oh, shoot, now what do we do? So we think that branding is the answer to that, and I don't think that there's a very clear-cut definition of, I don't really think that there's a massive career for that in independent film as it stands right now. I think that's something that's going to need to become bigger. That brings us back to where we are now. So what we're doing, again, is putting that branding element that we think is missing for filmmakers and an overall company, together with what's really missing, which are females on screen, female-driven content. Even though tons of women and girls go to the movies and tons of guys love this stuff, there are numbers out there that say that female-driven content, it's really well done, makes back a lot more money than films that don't have strong female characters in it. I think that's just the way that our society is going. We want to see more well-rounded characters, people, movies, and that's our basic business model, and that's what brought us to the Venture Development Center at UMass, which is that incubator here in Boston. And what they're trying to help us do, which is one of the things that I want to stress to anybody who wants to be in film, is love what you do, and don't compromise that for money, unless money is your main goal. But if money is your main goal, I would say don't get into film, because go into finance or something like that. It's difficult right now to figure out how to make money consistently in film, so you really have to love what you do, but make sure that your finances are straight. And so that's what these guys are helping us do. What we're trying to figure out is how do we attract those investors and how do we convince them that we're going to make our money back and therefore their money back. So that's overall general careers in the film industry. We've got plenty of time, so I want to know if you guys have any questions. And if not, I have some more to answer too.
I have a question.
Sorry, you might.
Sure. I guess my question has...
Oh yeah, it's for the broadcast.
Yeah,
you won't hear it.
That's that I don't hear you. My question was somewhat about the intersection between the writing and the law aspect.
Okay.
Meaning, like, if you're a lot of what you spoke about, or your experience in doing things, it sounded like it was very original content focused.
Correct.
There's adaptations of.
Totally.
There's if you wanted to develop something around, a great book, and you thought you had some great ideas how this would be a movie. Can you speak to how people get, in touch with whoever has the film rights and developing a script and how that system works?
A little bit. I've never gone through this myself, although I've had ideas too, and I've gotten this question a few times. It's not too clear-cut, to be completely honest. If there's a really, really popular book that somebody wants to adapt, let's say, and you're just an independent writer, that would be really, really hard to get the rights to. Generally, it would be very expensive. And I believe that I sort of want to do some research on this and get back to you, but I believe that the publisher of that book would have the rights to it. I'm sure the author would have either a portion of the rights, in some cases, possibly all of it. But that's an IP issue, right? So you definitely need a lawyer involved, and oftentimes what happens is optioning happens, if you're familiar with that term, which means that, and this is the same with a script, a book.
Get an option to develop something.
Yeah. So a book or a script is written, and a company, or in the book's case, a film company, or in the book's case, a screenwriter, or the studio that's hired the screenwriter, options that book. And that means that they pay whoever has the rights for a certain amount of time, whatever is, given on the contract that they agree to, that they can have that to develop a script for that book. And then if they don't make anything out of that, then an option expires and goes back to the rights holders of that original piece of content.
Okay.
Or it keeps going.
The second question would be about, I guess, more about like an original script or whatever. Do you end up submitting those when, like, if you were, before you started a company to do this?
Yeah.
Would you be sending those into a studio house way that entrepreneurs send business plans to VCs? Is that kind of the way it works, and they screen through it?
Yeah, and interesting sort of point you brought up there is that if you were to send your script to Warner Brothers, like, scripts at warnerbrothers.com or something like that, most likely it wouldn't go very far because there's too many of that. There's too many film scripts being submitted that sort of way, and a lot of times that's not even an option, especially for a big studio. Smaller studios, there's independent studios all over the place, or production companies, sometimes they call themselves. That is more of a possibility. But the same way you submit something to a VC, an investor, you generally have a connection to them, right? So that you've vetted them in some way that this thing is coming and that they should go and read it or watch it or whatever you're giving them. Same thing when it comes to script reading. There's so many ideas, so many scripts out there, and it takes a long time to read them, right? Each script is 90 minutes on average. So most of the time, bigwigs aren't reading scripts until the people underneath them have read them. Script readers is probably one of the most popular jobs in Hollywood because there's so many scripts to read. So the thing that's been most successful for myself and anybody that I know is finding the personal connections that you can, that you have. I mean, really, and nowadays it's super easy to find this quickly using Facebook or asking your friends via email or picking up the phone and calling someone who you know knows somebody in Hollywood and just start talking about your idea, because you really are only a few degrees away from everybody. It's something that I've learned. It doesn't always work, of course, but that has been the most successful. And then there's contests. So just like there are film festivals for finished films, there are tons and tons of script contests. And I actually have a database of all of the really good ones and when to submit every year. I don't know if that's something you're interested in, but I could share that with you if you wanted.
Okay. All right.
I have a question. Hi.
Hi.
My question is about shooting in sequence, and I know that there aren't any movies that are shot in sequence, are there?
Yeah, rarely.
Yeah.
Very, very rarely.
Yeah, but I really admire the actors because that is just so much work having to, not shoot it in sequence, and we have to travel sometimes.
Yep.
And how is it? I don't want to say how do they do it. They're actors, of course. That's how they do it.
Yeah.
But do they have other problems because of that?
To the actors?
Yeah, just to get into character and with all the confusion of everything and.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of respect for actors, and this is something that I would not even be able to fully speak to, right? Because what they go through is a very, very personal experience in a very public setting, and then it gets displayed publicly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they get paid for it. It's actually a very strange thing if you think about it, right? And then we all feel like we're their best friend when we watch them.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and that's the point, and they're winning when they do that. I think from, what I do know and understand, if you've ever heard this, I don't know if you have, but people in the film industry talk about this, and they definitely teach this in film school, is that idea of protecting actors. You sort of, the director and the producers and people working around them tend to say, don't talk to them, and, don't do this and don't do that. And a lot of people think that it's because, they're bigwigs and I'm the little guy. But really, the reason for that is because they pretty much have to be on all the time. And they're not themselves when they're on, they're somebody else. And that takes a lot of emotional and mental work, and sometimes physical work, especially if, like the time difference. Say somebody has to lose and gain weight or something like that, then that's, a severe effort for them, often on screen. So I'm sure I could go on and on about how much I respect actors, and what's really important as well when you're working with actors, I'd say, is to make sure that you and the actor are on the same page from the beginning. So when it comes to rehearsing doesn't just mean, and rarely actually means, running lines, right? Just reading the script back to each other to memorize stuff. Memorization is something that they do themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Rehearsal is really for the director and the actor getting to know the character together, and then having that actor turn that character that's on the page into the character that's actually going to be on film, which can oftentimes be very different. So I would say, yes, I think their job is very hard. I don't wish to do it myself. But it's a great point. Glad
Well,
you
thank
brought
you
it
for
up.
speaking about that with me.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it.
I've got a couple questions.
Yeah.
In terms of movie shorts, what is the best case scenario a movie short maker would want to have happen?
Love that question. So there are plenty of people who are creating whole businesses and distribution platforms around short films, and sometimes feature films will sneak their way onto there, but people are still really trying to figure this out, especially with the advent of YouTube and that becoming more popular and more well respected for just entertainment content viewing, period. I think traditionally some of the best things that can happen to a person who makes shorts are commercials and music videos, and those can be really lucrative. But if you're actually talking about making money on an individual short film, best case scenario, Vogue hires you to make a short film, or a car company hires you to make a short film. It's not a commercial, but it features their car, right? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
BMW will make those kinds of things. But that's really rare, right? You can't sort of just go out there and make whatever short you want and say, like, well, I hope BMW buys this because they put a BMW in it. It doesn't really work like that. That's commission work. So film festivals are really big for short films. Most of the films that go through film festivals are shorts. And that's good and bad, right? Because there's a place for you to go with them, but you don't make money off of them. That's not, you don't get paid as a filmmaker. Although there are some newer online websites I know that will pay you. Speed and Spark is a brand new company in the last couple of years that came out, and they're trying to redefine the way films, short films and feature films are funded, made, and distributed, and they charge to watch those films. If you're a participant of their website, then you get sort of earned currency called Sparks. So if you have those, you can use those to watch things, or you can put your credit card in ahead of time, and then whatever you come across that you like, you can just say, like, yeah, I'll pay $2.99 to watch that short film. There isn't really a very good answer for this, and it's one of the big reasons why I actually did not make a short for Sweet Desert Prom, because the time, effort, and money that it would have taken me to complete that may not have been worth it to me, you know?
Okay, so say hypothetically.
Yeah.
It's not so hypothetical.
That you've made a film?
Yeah. So this is, say, a 10-minute movie short.
Yeah.
It's almost all female. We used one audio guy, but everything else,
Oh,
everything
cool.
was all female. And there was a term, I forgot what it is, but there's a term of a movie producer has to do with the statistics behind what you were saying.
Yeah.
I can't think of what it is, though. I almost texted my friend, but I was taking notes on my phone because my pen died.
A statistic behind the lack of females in film?
Yeah, and there's a term used for something that she's trying to promote more awareness about this, and so she calls it, there's like a something film festival that has specifically to do with you need to have, there's 3 criteria in it. It has to, I can't remember it anymore. I could find that out for you. And,
Yeah, I'm curious.
you know, I can text somebody by the end of this and get it back.
Totally.
Yeah. But anyway, so it's a 10-minute movie short.
Mm-hmm.
It's in production, editing right now. It's almost done.
Cool.
It's our first thing. We were foolish enough. We made a teaser, a trailer kind of a thing.
Nice.
Even though it's only a 10-minute. Yeah.
That's fine. No, you need to, believe me.
And it was fun, and it was a great
That's
experience.
awesome.
It was awesome, you know, but we're like, okay, now what are we going to do with it? It's done being edited. What's the best case scenario? We're not expecting to make money on it, but
Totally. How to get recognition, how to get a scene, period. There's a good and bad, a million ways to do that. Figuring out the best way to go for your particular film depends on what it's about, depends on the genre. There are film festivals for women filmmakers, there are film festivals for horror films, there are film festivals for romance, probably. I don't know, I've never come across them, but I'm sure it exists. And then there's doing it yourself, which basically means distributing it. The film festival route is a very long journey, depends on what you want to get out of it. I would also suggest, having gone through this and seeing other people go through it, that you find a PR person who understands film festivals, and whether it's somebody who's done this a million times and you're paying them, or they're just starting out and they're trying to get into the business, so maybe they're a little bit cheaper, whatever it is. Do you know what withoutabox.com is?
No.
Withoutabox.com is really cool. They're actually linked with IMDb also. I don't know if IMDb owns Without a Box, or they're owned by a some other overall corporation. But Without a Box is a place where you can submit online to, I believe at this point, 99.99% of all film festivals, like in the world. So you go on, you create a profile for your film, and you fill out the kit, it's called, that, says the synopsis, the logline, the title, all the people involved, anything else, any trailers that you have, images from behind the scenes. Put this all online, and then when these dates come up for different film festivals, you say submit, and it'll tell you whether or not you filled out all the required criteria, and it just auto submits, sort of like what's the college app? The Common App? Yeah, that one. It's exactly the same as that. So you create your application for college, and then some colleges ask for, if you're going to art school, or portfolio, and then you have to add that on. But generally, your Common App is ready for most colleges, except for like the other details that they have. It's the same exact thing for festivals. Okay. And you can browse fests on there and read about them.
All right, now one more kind of specific goofy question.
Okay.
The last scene, out of sequence, but nonetheless, it's the last scene we went to, New York City, and
Uh-huh.
it was a quick thing in front of Tiffany's.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took a while just to shoot what was going to come down to a minute. And we didn't know. We just kind of did it quickly.
Right.
I think there was a high-profile person in Tiffany's that morning that we were shooting, so we went, Tiffany's on a corner, so we were on the other corner.
There's like a crowd outside or something?
There was all kinds of security people.
Got
and,
it.
They were all wired and such. So we did what we did. We certainly used the image of Tiffany's. We read online, it seems like it's considered a public place, so there's no expectation of, I don't know. But people were walking, a lot on the sidewalk, walking by and stuff, and we thought, we've had our people sign releases.
Totally.
But are you allowed to create a short film and have the images of adults, children, whatever, walking by and stuff?
This is a fine line topic. So if you did the right thing having everybody who you know is going to be in the film sign releases, that's great. Somebody in the background could potentially come after you for something, but you're not even trying to make money on this thing, right? If it was a feature film, it might be different. Even then, if it's a low-budget feature film, or somebody can yell at me somewhere who knows more about law than me, but generally the rule in film is sort of you have to take risks, and you have to figure out whether it's worth the risk for you guys to get that shot, if that's going to give you the production value that you need, and it's like crucial to the story, and some passerbys are going through, but you can't really tell who they are, or whatever it is, then you have to make that decision. The chances of someone in the background coming after you for that kind of thing is slim to none, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a short film going out to festivals, that kind of thing. I would say if BMW did a car commercial on that street in front of Tiffany's, they would have to ask Tiffany's, because Tiffany's would then go, well, yeah, we're going to sue BMW because we can get something from that. So that's my general answer to that.
Okay.
As far as the Tiffany's logo goes, I'm not quite sure about that. That can become an issue sometimes. I mean, even if you're like in a grocery store and behind you is the candy aisle and you have like a Snickers bar and all these other things, Hershey's, whatever, there, again, the likelihood of somebody going after you for those small logos there is not likely, but in film school they sort of teach us, like, if you're shooting something with drinks or a Coke can or like an alcoholic beverage or something, turn the label around. If it's like very prominent, even if it's the Coke shaped bottle or whatever, they can't sue you for that, as far as I can tell. Anything I know right now, I don't think they can. I think it's logo specific, but that's sort of a fine line call on the filmmaker's part. Something you're going to deal with all the time. Never ends.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
I have one more.
Back
Oh,
there.
okay, go to them first.
Lauren, I just wanted, do you aspire to eventually work for, say, Universal or MGM, or do you see yourself just staying in independent films?
I've never really been attracted to the studio system, to be honest. I didn't even really want to go to Hollywood. and I didn't really know why at the time. I sort of was like, oh, it doesn't really feel like me. But what I realize now, another element of that is that I don't want to work for them, I want to work with them, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
My goal of working with a studio would be to start making enough films and sort of making our footprint on the independent world loud enough, meaning that generally we're engaging an audience and it gets larger and larger every time, to the point where we can't be ignored and maybe a larger company wants a piece of that. That would be the closest thing. If somebody wants to hire me to direct Scarlett Johansson's next superhero movie, then I would consider that, that kind of thing. But that's not my overall goal. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Yeah.
Anybody else? I don't want to be a microphone on. Okay.
And then somebody on the stream asked a question, so I'll answer that one next. So.
Okay. What fascinates me also are the stunt actors.
Oh yeah.
Now, are they just naturally good fighters, or do they have to go to a certain school and learn certain moves?
I know that there are stunt schools. I don't know a lot about them. I also know that generally there are stunt men and women that become well known for specific things. So whether it's martial arts or falling from buildings, there's tons and tons of things I'm sure you could specialize.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I would like to know. It'd be interesting to know how many, like the percentage of stunt people who go through a school or who end up coming from outside of the industry, mastering a physical craft of some kind, and then realizing that Hollywood needs that all the time. It's a very valuable role. I would imagine. I hope that they get paid a lot of money to do the things that they do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Alright, so what was this one? Let's see. Okay. Mitch Connor 4 says, what kind of computer program is best for visual effects? This is not my area of expertise. I know that Maya is really good for animation, although I would say visual effects not so much. After Effects is something that is easily accessible by anybody even starting out. That's an Adobe product that even comes in the whole Adobe package, I know, and you can do a lot of things with that. There are some other equivalents that I'm not too familiar with. Although, Al, if you have time, you can Google that and maybe answer him more.
Yeah.
Cool. Yes?
I have a question. When he asked you earlier about submitting scripts, after he asked that question, I remember, I've heard in TV, remember when Hurt Locker came out? Yeah. There was a guy, he was a former, he used to be in the Army or Navy, whatever he was, and he said that he's the one who submitted the script and they took his ideas. So I'm thinking,
oh wow,
how
I didn't know about that.
There's a way people could send this script. I'm just wondering, is there a way like people could, how you like send a letter, it's certified.
Protect yourself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of having your
very good question. So again, these legal lines are really, really hard to define, and don't take my word for any of what I'm about to say. But this is what I know. This is what I did with my script, and this is what was recommended to me by multiple people who know more than me. Is to submit the script to the Writers Guild of America registration portion, and they basically then have a database of films, of scripts, and you can submit as soon as you write one draft. You could, I think, even write an outline. Let's say I didn't even write the full script, I just wrote an outline for Sweet Desert Palm, and then I could, it's okay.
I'm sorry, I thought I shut it off.
It's okay.
I'm trying to find it. Oh, jeepers.
Don't worry about it. I could write an outline for Sweet Desert Palm, make sure to title it Sweet Desert Palm, say who's by, copyright Lauren Tracy, the date, and then I would submit it to them. And then once I have a new draft, I can resubmit and keep doing that. So basically, it's out there. They know you pay. I think it's like $20 or something like that to do that.
Is it per page or per
Submission.
Per submission. I don't remember if you resubmit or update. I don't think that you have to pay again. But it's just whole script, one-time fee from what I did. And you can use that, you can try to use that to protect yourself, let's say in a court of law, if you felt like somebody was taking your idea. My general rule in film is that there are original ideas, and scripts are somewhere between a movie product and an idea, right? It's like a middle stage between actually having the film it's the same every single time. You watch it, you know that if somebody just copied that film directly and put it out there, that's copyright infringement. But if somebody wrote a similar script with a similar character, a similar idea, that could happen separately. You can't necessarily prove that they stole it, right? So it's sort of a fine line. My general, what I feel about writing scripts and worrying about protecting yourself is do it, take the sort of general necessary precautions, but know that in film it's your original voice that's really the product, right? If you're adapting a book and you have the rights to that book and somebody else adapts that book without having the rights to it, that's a clear-cut case.
Can you still sue them?
You can always sue. You can always sue. Whether or not you'd win would probably be pretty hard, I think, to win.
The reason I asked is there are a couple of years, it's been going on in Hollywood. A lot of people have been saying, oh, that was my script, and then whoever made the movie is like, oh, no, that's not theirs, blah, 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 and you hear it on TV.
I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. I'm sure it does. I'm sure some smaller person has submitted a script. Maybe a studio said, we don't really love that script, but we love the idea. Let's do something like that. I don't doubt that that's happening. I don't know of any cases where it is, but I'm not really familiar with the cases that you're specifically talking about. But are you a writer?
No, I was a former student. I was studying media.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I can speak much more to it than that. I mean, if it's a completely original idea that's really hard, you do have to be careful who you send it to early on. You want to make sure, I would say, you start off small and start sending it to people you know that know other people. Have them read it and say, do you think it would be good for that person that you know? And let them sort of decide if they have a personal connection, that person's going to be less likely to take that idea, right? So, again, like you're saying, Hollywood's all about personal connections. The fact of the matter is that it is. So I would say that's more the way to go if that's something that, somebody's worried about. Can't say whether or not it's actually happening. With true stories, I'm sure it happens all the time, though, right?
Well, a lot of, you hear about it after the movies come out. You hear about it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that was my script, and then
you never know. Who's telling the lie?
Yeah.
Either side.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to know, like, these people who claim that they stole the script, is there with them?
What recourse?
Yeah, protect themselves, and how come that ended up happening to them? And
right.
it's kind of like submitting a paper to your school. You know you have it on some drive, and then you send it, and you have the original. So I'm just wondering, did these people...
Oh, okay. I would say that if the script is like literally directly ripped, if it's word for word somebody else's script, I don't know if anybody in Hollywood would be that dumb to just make that script, right? But, and then therefore that person goes, well, look, it's dated on my computer, timestamped by my computer that I made it on this day, and here are the lines that are read in this movie, and you didn't buy this from me. That I'm sure you could sue and get money or your rights or a cut of the movie or something like that. But I would bet that more often than not what's happening is it's a similar storyline, it's a similar character, it's a similar event, often probably a true story.
Actually, Lauren, a filmmaker, Montina, there's also, and I think that this is still valid, you used to be with I think they call it a poor man's copyright, where if you print out your script, mail it to yourself, sealed envelope. I heard that still stands up. If you
I did hear that too.
Yeah, so it's an easy way to protect your material.
Because that's then time-stamped as well, right? Date and time-stamped.
Yeah.
Wasn't answering my question.
I'll ask a question. This is along the branding lines.
Yeah.
I think as much as people want to, they say that they want to support female writers, producers, filmmakers, as many programs as there are, I think when it comes to, in my experience, putting down money and making hires, it scares people. It scares people to invest money and hire in something that's branded as centered around female content. So I was wondering if you had any reservations about maybe branding yourself that way, marketing yourself that way, and if you thought maybe it would limit your ability to sell things in terms of somebody saying, I don't want to invest in something that's branded as female because it's going to limit the scope of where I can market this.
This is a really big question. I'm going to repeat the question. So essentially, Jocelyn was asking me whether or not I have reservations about identifying as a person who makes female-driven content, or as a female who makes content, as a female who makes female-driven content, which is like a double no-no, right? At first I wanted to scream no, definitely not, and I'll get back to why in a second, but honestly, yes. When I first started X Factor with my dad, I actually didn't even consider myself a feminist, and I just never really felt like I had to identify with that. I mean, I was a jock girl growing up, and I didn't feel different than my male counterparts in any way. So when it came to filmmaking and business, again, I didn't really feel that way. But as I learned more, I realized that that was extremely rare. Really, really, really rare. The way women are perceived by society and specifically in the film industry at this point, I don't think that perception is so much conscious as it is unconscious. What I'm really reserved about at this point, learning everything that I have, is that statistically, investors and studios don't invest in females or female-driven content as much as males. People are still trying to figure out why. I have my own theories, but the fact of the matter is, I am a female, and I think that the content that I want to make, the content that I love to watch, actually, it's all about men. I love shows and movies about power-hungry, like, domineering men. Like, that's my favorite stuff. So I said, well, okay, well, that's what I want to make then, right? But in the end, I realized that when I was writing, I wasn't as attracted to creating that content. It was something that intrigued me. So I wanted to sort of twist it and say, well, I want to do that from a female perspective. And what I realized was I didn't even know I wanted that. It's just that I wasn't seeing it. So then that's when I realized that's what I wanted to create. So now that brings me to, no, I don't want to shy away from that at all, because it is literally the biggest thing that makes me stand out in this industry. There are a lot of female filmmakers out there who, there's article upon articles written about this and in interviews, that women filmmakers don't want to be seen as women filmmakers, they want to be seen as filmmakers. And I sort of take the opposite. I want to be known as a women filmmaker because it's rare, and I want to stand out because of that, and if that can help my content be seen, then great. I think that's awesome. The content has to be really good, that's a given, right? Or else people aren't going to care, or they're going to laugh at me, or whatever it is. But for me, I think that's the thing that's actually gotten us where we are today. I mean, at first I had a lot of reservations about it, but once I realized that that was the thing that people were latching onto more than anything else I was saying, there's so many filmmakers out there, right?
Yeah.
Sweet as Her Palm is one among many. If I didn't necessarily tell them, the world, that both industry and audience, that this is female-driven, badass female-driven content, it may have just sort of blended in, right? There's other thrillers out there. It's not necessarily an obvious thing. Before you tell people that there aren't that many women characters on film, female protagonist in the film is about 15% in Hollywood. But until I say that, most people don't realize it, right? So once you make them aware of that and then say, and we're giving it to you, and they say, yeah, I love movies like that. Whoa, I didn't realize I'm not getting all those movies that I love as much. Then they get really excited. So yes and no, but it's a fine line. We try to avoid the word feminist. Because it has a bad connotation, even though it's exactly, what we're talking about.
Well, it scares people. People don't want to take risks with their money. They want to go with what has worked because it's the safest investment. So.
And that's why we have to go after people who already understand this, right?
Yeah.
Or as soon as you teach them, they go, oh, wow, I really do care about this. I didn't realize it. Or I have kids. I have a daughter. I want her to have stuff that I didn't realize she had. Yeah.
Just a quick observation. I don't need the microphone. I just want to say I think it's really cool. Your family also is obviously very supportive. You got your mom, your dad, your brother. So I think that's great.
They live in Acton too, but they are very supportive. Yeah, no, that's one of the things about starting a company is that for a while you don't have any money, right? So as you're looking for investors, you need a bigger team than just yourself, or else you're never going to get that investor, because they're going to go, well, who's going to help you do this as soon as I give you money? So it's been a real blessing, for sure.
Right, that's great.
And the fact that they're all interested in this stuff, too, that doesn't always happen. We have another question and a comment. What is your most anticipated movie of the summer? Mine is Godzilla. Looks real good. Oh boy, I don't even know where to begin with this one. There are tons and tons of films coming out this summer that I think are really great. Actually, a lot of them are going to be female-driven, which is awesome. There's a movie, I don't know how good it's going to be, called Lucy, coming out with Scarlett Johansson, and sort of she's breaking her own mold a little bit right now, but it's a sci-fi thriller, and she really kicks ass in this movie. I don't know fully what the plot is, but I'm excited that that's even happening, period. I'm also excited for Godzilla. It has really great actors in it, which is really great for a Hollywood remake, or else you get a little worried that it might not be that good. Anyone else?
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah, Ma.
You mentioned a little while ago that filmmaking or filmmakers need to take risks.
Uh-huh.
What was it like filming your trailer?
Oh.
In a remote location.
You gotta bring that up, huh? We shot the trailer in the middle of the Mojave Desert, and we had to postpone shooting a little bit, and it was in the spring, and so we moved into the summer, and in the summer, it's really hot in the desert, so it ended up being 110 degrees that day. And the only shade you have is either under the palm trees that we found, in the diner that we shot in, or in our trucks. So that was really, really intense. Sunscreen and hats were all over the place. We also had to walk and lug stuff. I was with my cinematographer at one point, and we knew we had to get a couple of these shots going down this long dirt road. And we were lagging behind the group because we were taking those shots, and they were trying to get to the shade. And I just sat down at one point. There was no shade around, and I must have been dehydrated. I was just so tired. He was the one carrying the stuff, and I was like, I'm so sorry. I need to rest for a second. I'm so scared I'm not going to be able to get all the way down there. But luckily we had coolers full of water and food and stuff, so we would be fine. But everybody who was on that set was absolutely amazing. The mother of Cole here, who plays Noah in the trailer, was incredible. My heel started bleeding at some point from walking so much, and she bandaged me up and was just like all gung-ho about it, which you don't really see a lot, so that was really great. The other sort of similar to your problem was we had to shoot guerrilla style, so we tried to get permits, but we weren't able to. So they wouldn't allow us to even get permits at the place that we wanted to shoot. And we were previously promised that we would be able to. So a week or two from shooting, they said we couldn't, and we had nowhere else to shoot. So we said, likelihood of somebody finding us in this oasis in the middle of the desert is pretty slim. So we went ahead and did it. So we probably won't be shooting there for that. Yeah, risks.
Risks.
Yep. Yeah.
Got one more. Besides being in a film school at college,
Yeah.
what was the most valuable experience at AB or in college outside of the program for you being a filmmaker now?
Ooh. Well, in school, in college, we worked a lot in class, but one of the biggest things was working together outside of class. Filmmaking took up so much time, and I didn't really think about it too much at the time because I loved what I was doing. But between soccer and filmmaking, I didn't really do that much, And over at Emerson, when I almost went to Emerson, and one of their big things was, whether or not it was true, I don't know. We can ask somebody who goes to Emerson. But the teacher who was sort of pitching prospective students when we came said, our students are not partiers. They're really hardcore film. They do this 24/7. It's almost like a job while you're there, so you really have to love it. And for me, that was like an exciting challenge for some reason. And I loved that idea, and that's really what it was. So I think for me, it was working in groups outside of class was a really interesting experience. I think in film school, you learn to work with serious groups that actually are trying to get something done, possibly earlier than maybe other majors before you go into the real world. So that was, everybody knew what a set was like. Everybody knew what had to run efficiently, and if something fell through or if somebody was late, then you didn't want to work with them again on the next project, right? And it would be the same thing in the outside world.
Emerson College, class of '86.
Yeah! So, was it
My
hardcore party or
experience-
hardcore film?
In all my years at Emerson, I think my friends who went to UMass Amherst, in my entire life of drinking, I think they drank more at UMass. We did not party.
Yeah.
It was...
RIT, needless to say, is kind of a nerd school, so regardless, that wasn't really that huge there, but it was probably a little bit of a good thing.
We were always a little kind of freakish, really. We still are, apparently, from what I've seen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, not a party school.
No.
No soccer team.
Yeah, I think they have one now.
Oh, really?
But I think for me it was too new still. I remember that was one of the reasons why I was like, I think RIT.
Yeah. Just that was an FYI her moment.
8:57. Cool.
Okay. Lauren, thank you very much. It's been a great presentation. Really enjoyed it.
Really fun for me. Thank you guys.